Okay, so here we are back in our composition, and I want to talk more about the timeline and actually animating, turning this into something that's interesting to look at. So, how do we do that? Well, in this particular case, I would first start with the audio. Now, we talked about we could see the waveform and the audio fades out about here. So, what I would do here is I would actually preview the audio by hitting the period on my keyboard and listening to the audio. So, I'll do that now. And there it goes to fade out. Now, should say I'm hitting the period on my numeric keypad because I do have an extended keypad. If you don't have the period on a numeric keypad, there are other shortcuts that you can enable to listen to audio only. If you don't want to listen to audio only, you can always hit Control 0 on your keyboard and it'll play through and you'll hear the audio at the same time. So essentially what I want to create here is like just like a really simple show open. And that's what we're going to do. Right in here, you hear that kind of staticky sound or that kind of staggering sound. And I think it'd be really cool to do some type of like almost like an TV glitch effect, a very simple one. I want to keep this as simple as possible so that you understand how it is that we go about animating in After Effects with motion graphics. So I know somewhere in here, I want to have kind of this flicker static effect. So I might mark this and I might do that by holding down shift and the number 1. And you're going to see a timeline marker pop up right there that says number 1. Now I could, I could right click this, I could hit settings and I could say, um, flicker effect. And that tells me, right here, I want some type of flicker effect to happen. And that's the only major thing that I immediately hear when I hear the audio for what I want to do. Otherwise, I think it'd be kind of interesting to have the text kind of come at us slowly. Um, a big problem I see is that the coloring is off between this typography and the background footage. So we'll fix that as well. But let's just start with some simple animation. And we'll start with the text kind of moving towards us. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it so I don't accidentally move it or delete it, anything like that. I'm going to select my Photoshop layer here and I'm going to hit return on the keyboard and I'm going to rename this Earth 2020, just so it's easier for me to know what's going on. When we get into a lot of layers here, it can get very confusing as to what layer is what. So it's a good idea to always name your layers. So I'm going to open up the drop down here and transform is already open. And I'm going to go ahead and just make this a little bit smaller. Just make it 35. All I have to do now is just click right here next to the stopwatch and it's going to create a keyframe right here. I'm going to move forward in my timeline and I'm going to say, somewhere in here we're going to scale it up to 50%. And I'm kind of guessing that by now the text is going to be gone. So that's why I went ahead and set a keyframe here. Now, to be safe, I could move it all the way to the end of the timeline, which maybe I will just do that and I'll just make it a little bit bigger, 55%. But I do see the Earth 2020 text kind of fading out as we get up in this area. So now if I preview it by hitting 0, so things are starting to move. Things are, all it is the text is just scaling forward, but it's, starting to look like a motion graphics piece. Now I want this text to somehow come on in an interesting but very subtle but unique way. The footage here is dark, and so I don't want to start immediately with this footage that's like in your face. So how would I do that? Well, One way I think I want to do it is I want the new series and Earth 2020 to be two separate elements, to come on in two separate individual ways. So I double click that pre-composition, and now I'm inside of this pre-comp. Now it says it's called Photoshop. We renamed it Earth 2020. If we look at the source name, it is still Photoshop. So that can get a little bit confusing. So maybe what I'll do is go up into my window here and I'll hit return and I'll name this Earth 2020 as well. So now when I'm inside the pre-comp, it's called Earth 2020. Hopefully that didn't confuse you guys. Okay, so here we are. And if I turn this layer off and on, we can see this is Earth 2020. I want to do some type of transition. So I'm going to go up to Effect. I'm going to go all the way down to Transition. Now I have a lot of extra effects here that you guys probably aren't going to have. That's okay. These are third-party effects, but you're going to have a lot of built-in effects inside of After Effects that are amazing. And that's what I'm using for these tutorials. I'm going to go into Transition, and I'm going to go down here to Gradient Wipe. There's all types of wipes here. They're all different interesting wipes. I found I really liked Gradient Wipe for this effect. And if I go up here to my project window, instead of project, it's called Effect, right? So there's two panels side by side. There's the project window and there's the effect window. If you wanted to move this effect window, somewhere maybe over here, that's okay. You can do it. I'm going to go ahead and move it over here for this so you guys can see this better. So there's our effect window. And I'm just going to go from 0. I'm going to turn it up. You can see here what it's doing. It's kind of doing like this interesting gradient white. It's interesting, but it's a little too hard on the edge. So if I look right below the completion, I see the softness parameter. It's set to 0. I'm going to turn that all the way up. And see how much nicer that looks? So now if I mess with my transition, there's a real soft edge to that gradient wipe. It makes it way more interesting to transition. So I'm going to set a keyframe to my clock, just like I did on my other timeline here with the scale. But I set it up here, which is okay, because if I go down here to the timeline and I open up the window, and now I open up effects, because there's effects here, I can see here's my gradient wipe, and there's a stopwatch keyframe added right here. Okay, and let's go ahead and make it so it's dark, so it's 100%. You can see it there. I can control here, or I can control it up here. I'm going to go down to 4 seconds, and then I'm going to set it to 0. And I can drag it down like that, or I can undo it and I can just click, type in 0, hit return, and there we go. And one more quick note here. I'm going to go all the way to into my timeline. I'm going to take this time navigator in. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag, and I'm just going to magnify our timeline here. So the timeline is still 1909, but because we're only working in the short amount of time over here, I want to just go ahead and zoom in a little bit here so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. And there we go. So I'm going to scroll through here, and you can see, so 0 is black, gradient wipe starts reacting, and it comes on, and boom, there it is. I'm going to jump back into my main composition here, and actually let's just go ahead and call this, instead of output, let's just call it our main composition. So instead of going up to composition settings, what I could do is I could just hit Command K, and here we are, the composition settings panel, and I'll just call this main comp, and I'll click OK. And let's just give it a quick preview and see how it looks. And one quick note is you'll notice the audio went out there because I set that preference to only play the audio when the preview is in real time. So when the preview is in real time, it's playing audio. When it's not in real time, when it got up to here and it had to slow down because it's trying to render things out, it turns that audio off until it goes back and plays it in real time. So that's pretty cool. I do hear that sound. It sounds like maybe it cuts in right here. Yeah. So right here, when that flicker sound happens, that's when I want to see the new series pop on. Okay, like it'll pop on with a glitch effect. So let's go back into our pre-comp, and we can double click here, or we can just click right here. And I'm just going to take this layer, the new series. You can see that's highlighted up here. It's highlighted right here, and I can do one of two things. I can click and just drag this layer so it starts right here, or I can just click beginning of the layer and drag the endpoint in. Now, something else you'll notice is that wherever I move my time indicator on this main comp, inside my pre-comp, the indicator is in the same place. And that's another preference that we set up initially. So if you didn't set that preference up, then your time indicator is going to be on its own. Like if it's here in this pre-comp, then it's not going to be here. It might be over here in this main comp. So very important preference that we set up in the first video. So this will pop on right here. So I'll go ahead and play this. So right now you see it pop on. It's not very exciting. It's because there should be some type of flicker effect here, which we will come back to that in just a little bit when we apply some effects. So what else do we need to do here? Well, one thing that's really bugging me is this glow. It's just too much. So I'm actually going to jump in to this pre-comp, jump into this pre-comp. And in this pre-comp, we have something called layer styles. Layer styles are something that we can create in Photoshop or After Effects. If we create them in Photoshop, they will carry through to After Effects. And I don't love that outer glow. I want to adjust it. By adjusting it, I mean I want to turn it off. I do not like it. So now I can jump back into my main comp here, and there it is, no glow. I'm good with this. So next we need to figure out, okay, so the new series and Earth 2020 both come on, but they need to go away. They can't just stay up here the whole time. It's, I don't want to end with text up here. It needs to be a little bit more mysterious. And I get that from the audio. The audio is very kind of dark and eerie, and I don't want the text to stay up the whole time. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have to transition this text back out. And I think I want to transition it out the same way I transitioned in this Earth 2020 text, which was through a gradient wipe transition. So all I have to do is make sure that the layer is selected. You don't want to select the video layer or the audio layer. You want to select the layer that you want to transition and go up to Effect, Transition, Gradient Wipe. Now, one quick tip is because this is the last effect I did apply, if I go up to Effect, you're going to see right here is the last effect we applied. So I could just click this and boom, Gradient Wipe is here. So I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe by clicking here. And I know I like the softness to be 100%, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that up. And then I'm going to move down my timeline and I'm going to figure out where I want it to fade out, which I think is about right here. So I'm going to go ahead and crank this up to 100% and boom, now both of them are transitioning out. So you'll notice that New Series and Earth 2020 are both transitioning out because both of these are part of this pre-comp. So we can apply effects to pre-comps, we can apply position, scale, all that to pre-comps. We can go inside of pre-comps and we can do individual effects. We can do individual things like we could scale this individually if we wanted this word to scale separately from New Series and then, be seen out here. We could do that. I'm going to go ahead and undo that though. Just to show you the power of pre-comps. Pre-comps can get very powerful. They can also get very confusing if there's too many of them. But just think of a pre-comp as kind of like a folder inside of your timeline. So within that folder, you can put a bunch of different elements. You can do different things to those elements. Within that folder, those elements, you can put additional folders inside those folders and folders inside of those. You can go very, very deep and get very complex in your motion. So let's go ahead and preview this now. And you're going to notice it's not playing real time now, so the audio has stopped playing. And it should start transitioning out. Perfect. Very mysterious, very eerie. So now immediately what I notice is the earth color and the typography just aren't matching up. They just don't work for me. And I also don't like how the New Series is too similar to Earth 2020 in terms of its color. I feel like it should stand out and maybe be white. Okay, so how am I going to change the new series to white? Well, it's got the same thing. It's got layer styles applied to it as well. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to go down here. Here's color overlay. Perfect. It's set to a light blue. I'm just going to select a white, click OK. There we go. Very simple. If I wanted to add additional layer styles to this typography, the way I would do that is it's not an effect. Layer styles are actually under layer, believe it or not. You go down to layer styles, and here's all the different layer styles that come over through Photoshop. These are special effects, I would call them, that Photoshop uses that After Effects can read. After Effects can also apply them itself, and they're very powerful uses of drop shadow, inner shadow, outer glow, bevel and emboss, all that kind of great stuff. So now we've got white text over Earth 2020. Looking pretty cool. So the next thing I want to do here is I want to colorize this Earth. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to select the video footage. I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correction, and we're going to go down to Tritone. And Tritone adjusts the gray values. You can see immediately it made this in the brown tone. Well, if I was to turn this off, or back to the original, I want to match this blue. So I'm just going to select my eyedropper tool and pick a blue there and come down here and let's go ahead and turn it on. And there we go. Perfect. So look at that already. The blacks are a lot closer. The blues are nicer. Made a world of difference there. Really dig that. Let me try one other thing. I'm going to apply an effect, color correction tint. I'm going to turn off the tritone and I'm going to sample the blue. And here you can see that the blacks are still a little more black. I'll show you, like if I take a screenshot and if I turn this off and I turn the tritone effect on, here's tritone. See these bluish blacks? If I go back to show snapshot, here's a blacker black with a bluish earth. And I actually like the tint effect better. So I'm going to turn this off and turn tint on. And there we go. Awesome. Starting to get somewhere. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to add something called an adjustment layer. What an adjustment layer does is it's a layer that's invisible. You can apply effects to it and you put it over any layers below it, it'll affect. So how do I do that? I go to make sure my timeline is selected. I go to layer, new, adjustment layer. And automatically it drops it down here in my timeline. Now it doesn't look like anything is going on, but if you go over here to the right, you can see this little box here is turned on because that means it's an adjustment layer. If I turn this layer off and on, nothing seems to happen. It's like an invisible layer. But if I apply effects to this layer, and just for the sake of it, I'll go to a blur effect, a fast box blur, and I will crank up the blur. You see it's applying a blur to everything below it, right? If I was to turn that blur up and then maybe drop this adjustment layer below the type, the Earth 2020, it's only going to affect the Earth footage behind it because Earth 2020 type is on top of it. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you about what adjustment layers are. They're very, very powerful when they can apply effects to anything below them. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to look for an effect that maybe has kind of like a TV glitchy effect. So in my effects and presets, I'm going to type in TV. And I'm just going to see what pops up. And immediately I see these image special effects pop up. Now, these ones below these are all third-party plugins that I own that you are not going to have. So we're going to stick with the basic stuff that comes with After Effects. And I think I tested a couple of these out and I believe maybe it was weak. So I applied that to this adjustment layer and you can see it applied all these effects over here. Pretty interesting stuff here, okay? So now all of a sudden, because this adjustment layer is on top, it's applying this effect to the entire thing all the way through the whole piece, right? There's still stuff going on here. There's still stuff at the beginning. I only want it to happen right here when that audio kind of did that static sound to it, right? So how do I do that? Well, all I have to do is take the beginning of my adjustment layer and drag it over, right? So now it's not here, but it is here. Now I want it to also kind of start strong, go away, come in, go away, you know, just like the sound does. It's very quick, right? It's just a few keyframes. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to scroll this box down, scroll this box down, and I'm going to look at opacity. I'm going to set a keyframe for opacity. It's 100%. Now I'm going to go up into my preview window and I'm going to move forward one frame. See where it says next frame here? Click, next frame. Go back to my opacity. I'm going to turn it down to 0. Move forward one frame. Turn it back up to 100%. Move forward one frame. Back down to 0. And then move it forward one more frame. 100%. And then I'm going to take the end of my adjustment layer. I'm going to drag it down. And I'm going to say, I want you to end right there. And now after that, it should just be normal again, right? So it's like this quick effect. So let's see if this works. So that works pretty well. There's one thing I want to do, and I want to zoom in. I'm going to take my time navigator end here. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to make, instead of it just cutting off abruptly, I'm going to make it kind of fade out over a few frames. So we'll extend this a little bit, and then here's where it'll be 0. So if I back up, it's 100, 66, 33, 0. So it's just a little more subtle when it kind of comes out. Just like that. So that looks pretty cool. The next thing I want to do is I want to name this. We'll call this, hit return, we'll call this TV effect. I'm going to create another adjustment layer. So layer, new, adjustment layer. And I'm going to hit return, we'll call this just effects. And one thing I immediately want to add to this is a little bit of grain. It looks too crystal clear for me, which a lot of times happens in motion graphics. Things look too perfect, and I don't like it when they look so perfect. So one way to make it look not so perfect is to apply some grain. So I'm gonna go up to Effect, Noise and Grain, Add Grain. Immediately you see this box pop up. This is our preview window because grain can be kind of intensive when we add it to a project. If I change it from preview here to final output, that box is going to be gone. And now we can see the full grain effect. Intensity is a little bit too much for me, so I'm just actually going to turn this down to 0.75. And there we go. I'm good with that. Let me show you if I switch now from full resolution to half. I don't know how well you can see this, but the grain looks different at half res than it does at full res. So this is one of those examples of when you want to be full resolution to see that grain kind of play out and see how it actually works with the project file. Go ahead and preview this again. And you can see here that the previews are starting to slow down a little bit because we have applied grain. We've applied an overall TV effect, some overall color to the footage. It'll just start to slow it down a little bit. But I can hit 0 and just stop the preview here and just watch it. That's pretty cool. One other thing I'd like to see is something with a new series when it comes on here. And I think that could be something as simple as a light effect. And let's add it up here on the effects layer. So let's go to Effect, Generate Light Rays. And there's our light ray point. It doesn't look like it's doing much yet, but I want it to be beneath the grain. So I'm going to drag it beneath the grain. And this is just like in your timeline. Effects are layered one on top of the other. So now the grain is over the top of the light ray. I'm going to move the point of my light ray probably somewhere over in here. And now it's starting to look a little bit more interesting. And I want to adjust some other settings. So I'm going to crank the intensity way up, somewhere in here. I'm going to take the radius quite a ways down, probably about 10. Let's try 11. That's interesting. And I'm going to take the softness also way down. So it's a little more, actually we're going to take it way up so it's a lot softer. And the last thing I'm going to change on is I'm going to change it from round to square. And just as a point, like I don't ever really necessarily think that you should just apply an effect and just leave it at the default settings and go from there. These effects that are built into After Effects are very powerful. And with that being said, they are meant to be, the parameters are meant to be tweaked to, what works for your project. So when you apply a basic effect, there's so much more you can do to it by just adjusting a few of the parameters. So you can see here, just by me barely moving the center point of this effect, it's really changing the whole look of this type. So I think I want to start maybe right there. I'm going to set a keyframe here for the intensity. And if I scroll down this adjustment layer under Effects, Light Rays, you can see here's my keyframe. And I'm going to drag it out. So by the time the type is out, I want the intensity to be at 0. So let's preview this now. Oh, and actually I want the intensity not to start here. You can see it's a little bit there. So what I'll do is I'll go to my keyframe where it's at 500. This is when the type comes on, and I'll back it up 1 frame, and I'm hitting page up to go back 1 frame, and I'm going to turn it to 0. Actually, I'm going to have it start right when this type comes on here. Something like that. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, let's preview this. Again, we can't hear the audio because it's not playing in real time yet. So very cool. The one thing I see that is kind of bugging me is I want especially in the new series, I want this to be more transparent at this point than it actually is here. And how I would do that is with something called keyframe easing. Now, we will get more into advanced keyframing in another series, but for this one, I just want to show you the very basics of keyframe easing. And how you do that is I'm going to go into this pre-comp here, and I'm going to find, actually I'm going to come back out. I'm going to open up my keyframes here, and I'm going to look at the gradient wipe. And you can see here, these are linear keyframes. That means that this keyframe starts at 100%, it ends at 100%. It's 100%, like if you were to think of like a car doesn't start from 0 miles per hour and go immediately to 60 miles per hour in the first instant, right? It speeds up. That's a more natural flow of motion. That's what easing does. So by me selecting this key and right clicking and saying keyframe assistant, easy ease in, I'm telling this key to come in slower, 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 stop. Instead of, if it was just a linear keyframe and it would go full speed, full speed, full speed, full speed, full speed, full speed, stop. And that's just not natural, right? So if we right click and we say ease in, it's much more gradual. So you can see here that the transparency is starting to go sooner because it's coming into a stop, and it's gone, right? So it's a much more subtle, more pleasing to the eye transition because I added one eased keyframe. Like I said, if you want to learn more about keyframe easing, there will be another volume series on advanced motion that we'll talk in much more detail about easing and keyframes. Let's preview this one more time. And something to look at, this blue here. This blue means that this stuff is cached, right? We talked about in your preferences setting up a cache drive. So some of this stuff is stored on that cache because it hasn't changed. We haven't changed any of the animation. We changed the animation between these keyframes, which is why it's having to reload this and interpolate it and render it. But this stuff is in the cache. Very cool. So I'm going to add one more keyframe because I want this earth to come in much slower, right? I still want the same amount of time for the white, but I want it to kind of ease in slower. So how I do that is I double click, I come in here and I find my gradient effect by scrolling down. There's my gradient wipe. This time I'm going to ease this keyframe out. It doesn't matter on this one, but it does matter on this one. So watch in here. You can see how much is being shown now, but if I change this keyframe, I say keyframe assistant, easy ease out. See how much less of this you see because it's easing out of this keyframe. And it's revealing it slower, and then it's coming on full. So now if I was to watch this back, very cool. And I might just end this by fading out the planet. So the type comes out here, and then I'd probably click my footage here, scroll down, select a keyframe for opacity. It's at 100%. By the time it gets here, it's 0%. There we go. That's the basics of the After Effects workflow.